Hello and welcome to Starbound's second channel. My name is Gabriel the Bibi Capaldi and I'll be your narrator today. But before we get into today's story, please do check down below that you are subscribed to the channel. It's 100% free and helps us pop up on your feed a bit more often.
Check it out, boss. Those three humans are without a ship, and they don't even have a ground vehicle,
said Lonet as his hover disk glided a few feet above the ground. Hizit squinted his yellow eyes, scanning the horizon for any sign of the humans Lonet had mentioned. Standing atop his own hover disk, he raised a slender blue hand to shield his vision from the bright sun overhead. His gaze swept methodically from left to right, taking in the vast sea of crimson foliage that stretched seemingly without end before them. The red leaves swayed in the light breeze, creating a hypnotic effect across the landscape. Despite his keen vision, a trait all Krignians prided themselves on, Hizit could detect no sign of the human intruders.
"Where?"
he finally asked, frustration evident in his voice.
"I see nothing but red leaves for miles."
His gaze returned to Lonet, trying to determine what his subordinate was looking at. Hizit was a tall and lean Krignian, draped in the flowing azure robes that their species had worn for centuries, practical garments that allowed for both protection from harsh environments and the dignity befitting a successful trader. The fabric flowed around his lanky frame as he shifted his weight on the hover disk. Like all Krignians, his skin was a rich blue, several shades darker than his robes. His yellow eyes, large and almond-shaped, dominated his narrow face, providing excellent peripheral vision, an evolutionary advantage from their predatory past. Standing in similar fashion as Hizit, Lonet's face bore the characteristic wrinkles of their species, not a sign of age, but a natural trait that appeared shortly after maturity. The spotter wore a green visor that covered nearly half his face, the transparent display glowing with data streams only he could see.
"Where exactly did you spot these humans?"
Hizit demanded again, his patience finally evaporating in the humid air of Vernally. His hover disk drifted closer to Lonet's, the sound of the anti-gravity engines increasing in pitch as he closed the distance between them. Lonet tapped the side of his visor, the gesture both apologetic and explanatory.
"Through the drone network, sir. I should have been clearer."
He raised a three-fingered hand and pointed toward a particularly dense cluster of crimson vegetation that rose like a mountain in the distance.
"They're in a clearing just beyond that ridge. I picked them up on thermal scans first. Their body temperature runs higher than most species I know."
Hizit's upper lip curled in exasperation.
"So you didn't actually see them with your own eyes? Next time lead with that information, Lonet. I've detected humans on the drone network is quite different from check out those humans, don't you think?"
"My apologies, sir," Lonet said, head bowing slightly, the wrinkles on his face deepening with his frown.
"I got excited when I realized what they might be after. It's almost certainly the same thing we're hunting, the Bronics." "The Bronics?"
Hizit repeated, his irritation momentarily forgotten.
"You think primitive humans would travel all this way for Bronics?"
The Bronics were rare creatures, native only to the harsh environment of Vernally. Resembling massive centipedes, they could grow up to 20 feet in length, with hundreds of segmented legs that allowed them to burrow through the rocky soil with remarkable speed. Their bodies were covered in a natural armor plating that had evolved to withstand the planet's frequent acid rains and extreme temperature fluctuations. But what made them truly valuable, and the reason Hizit's expedition had come to this remote world, were the crystalline growths that formed along their carapaces. These crystals, formed through a biological process unique to the Bronics, contained compounds that the galactic pharmaceutical industry paid astronomical sums to acquire. A single mature crystal could power cellular regeneration treatments for hundreds of patients, or provide the base material for neural enhancement procedures that the elite of dozens of worlds clamored for. The hunt for Bronics had become increasingly competitive over the last decade, as the creatures grew more scarce and the demand for their crystals continued to rise across the settled systems. Hizit activated his own visor with a subtle eye movement, and immediately the drone feed that Lonit had been viewing materialized in his field of vision. Sure enough, 3 human figures moved through a clearing approximately 2 kilometers beyond the Red Ridge. They appeared to be scanning the ground with handheld devices, moving in a search pattern that suggested they knew exactly what they were looking for.
"You're right,"
Hizit conceded, zooming in on the image.
"Those are definitely humans, and there's only one reason they would have come to this wasteland of a planet."
He shook his head in disbelief.
"Even these primitive creatures have heard about the value of Bronix crystals. The market truly has reached every corner of the galaxy."
He manipulated the feed further, studying their equipment.
"Look at them. They don't even have proper hover technology. They're walking on the actual ground, with nothing but those projectile weapons for protection."
He chuckled, a sound like stones rattling in a metal container.
"Did they think they could just stroll around until they stumbled upon a Bronix and then shoot it? They will get themselves killed at most."
"Should we be concerned about them?" Lonit asked, adjusting his own visor to match Hizit's view. "Even primitives can be dangerous when desperate." Hizit waved a dismissive hand, the gesture causing his hover disk to bob slightly.
"Humans? No! It's the other proper hunters we need to worry about. The ones with actual technology and experience."
He deactivated the drone feed with another eye movement.
"Let's head back to headquarters. We need to coordinate our search grid better if we want to locate a Bronix before our actual competition does."
With ease, Hizit shifted his weight forward on the disk, causing it to accelerate smoothly in the direction of their ship. Lonit followed close behind, the two of them skimming over the tops of the crimson vegetation. The hover disks responded to the slightest shifts in balance and pressure, allowing them to navigate with a grace that would have been impossible with cruder forms of transportation. As they approached the coordinates of their ship, they began to descend gradually, diving below the canopy of red leaves. The temperature dropped noticeably as they entered the shadowy realm beneath the towering plants. Here, the ground was barely visible, a mosaic of twisted roots and small patches of dark soil. A winding river came into view, its waters a deep purple that reflected the filtered light from above. Hovering approximately 50 meters above the river's surface was their ship, the Seeker, a sleek vessel designed for long missions. Unlike military craft, the Seeker bore the hallmarks of its commercial origins: curved lines, polished surfaces, and subtle aesthetic touches that marked it as the property of a successful Krignian merchant. Hizit and Lonit guided their hover disks upward, approaching the underside of the ship where a circular hatch just large enough to admit a Krignian on a hover disk waited. As they neared, the hatch arised open, revealing a faint green light from within. In a matter of moments, they ascended through the opening one after another, the hover disks automatically powering down as they entered the ship's gravity field. They arrived directly in the bridge, a spacious, circular chamber that served as the nerve center of the ship. Unlike the crude vessels of less advanced species, there were no physical control panels or screens. Instead, the bridge was remarkably spare, with comfortable seating arrangements and a few decorative elements that reflected Krignian artistic sensibilities. Waiting for them was Krazat, the ship's captain and chief drone operator. Like all Krignians, he shared the blue skin and yellow eyes of his species, but his face bore more prominent wrinkles, and a series of small scars along his left jawline hinted at a more adventurous past than most of their kind. He rose from his seat as Hizit entered, offering a slight bow of respect to the businessman who had hired him and his ship for this expedition. "Welcome back, sir," Krazat said, his voice deeper than Lonit's. "I trust your scouting was informative." "Indeed," Hizit replied, stepping off his hover disk and allowing it to settle into a charging dock built into the floor. "Lonit has been monitoring the competition.
What's the status of the other hunting parties, beside the humans, of course?
A mention of humans caused both Krazat and Lonit to chuckle.
Oh, yes. Our bipedal friends without so much as a hovercart between them,
Krazat said, shaking his head.
Walking around on those 2 legs with their little guns, as if they have any hope of capturing a Bronix.
They might get lucky, Lonit offered, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it.
Luck won't help them extract the crystals without damaging them,
Hizit said dismissively.
Now, what about the real competition?
Krazat gestured with one hand, and a virtual window appeared in their shared visual space. The image showed a different part of the Vernally landscape, a rocky plain dotted with the same red vegetation, though sparser than in the region Hizit and Lonit had been exploring. The Krytar warriors have been methodically searching the northwestern quadrant, Krazat explained, zooming in on a group of furry, bipedal creatures moving around several land vehicles. The Krytars stood approximately 7 feet tall, their bodies covered in dense brown fur, with striations of darker coloring across their broad shoulders. Their faces were vaguely canine, with elongated snouts and alert, pointed ears. The vehicles they used were angular and functional, riding on 6 massive wheels designed to navigate difficult terrain. While considerably more advanced than anything humans had brought to Vernally, they still represented a level of technology that Krignians viewed as rudimentary at best. As they watched, several Krytar exited their vehicles and dropped to all fours, pressing their snouts to the ground and inhaling deeply.
"They're tracking by scent," Hizit observed. "Primitive, but potentially effective for locating Bronix tunnels."
"The Krytar are natural hunters," Krazat commented. "Their sense of smell is among the finest. Don't underestimate them just because their technology lags behind ours." Hizit nodded thoughtfully.
"They seem manageable enough. What other species are in play?"
Krazat manipulated the virtual display again, and the scene shifted to a view of the sky above a different part of the Crimson Forest. A flock of winged creatures soared overhead, their wingspans impressive even at a distance. "The Aviri arrived 3 days ago," Krazat explained. "A clutch of 15, led by Elder Screet if our intelligence is correct." The image zoomed in on one of the avian creatures. The Aviri resembled large birds of prey, with sleek bodies covered in bright feathers that shifted from deep purple to bright green, depending on how the light struck them. Their heads were dominated by large, forward-facing eyes, adapted for spotting prey from great heights, and curved beaks that looked capable of tearing through tough materials. Unlike true birds, the Aviri had developed grasping appendages at the joint of each wing, allowing them to manipulate tools and technology while still maintaining their ability to fly. Several of the creatures carried small devices strapped to their bodies, scanning equipment, Hizit assumed, or perhaps communication gear.
"Their natural flight gives them an advantage in reconnoitering," Hizit mused, "and those eyes can spot a Bronix tunnel entrance from hundreds of meters up. Still, they lack the technical sophistication to extract and preserve the crystals properly."
He waved a hand dismissively.
"They're a factor, but not our primary concern. Any others?"
A tense silence fell over the bridge. Krazat and Lonit exchanged a quick glance before Krazat adjusted the virtual display once more. "Yes," he said, his tone noticeably more serious. "The Reparians." The image shifted to show a scene of destruction. One of their surveillance drones lay shattered on the forest floor, its components scattered across the crimson undergrowth. As they watched, a reptilian hand reached down and picked up the central processing unit of the device, examining it briefly before crushing it between scaled fingers. Krazat shifted the view to a different drone feed, showing a group of Reparians moving through the forest on hover platforms that, while not as advanced as the Krignian discs, demonstrated a level of technology that commanded respect. The reptilians stood on 2 legs, their bodies covered in overlapping scales that ranged from deep green to burnished copper in color. Their heads were wedge-shaped, with vertical pupils set in yellow sclera and rows of small, sharp teeth visible when they communicated with each other. "They've destroyed 7 of our surveillance drones so far," Krasat reported grimly, "and they appear to be jamming our sensors in the eastern quadrant."
"How many?"
Hizit asked, his earlier dismissive attitude gone. "We've confirmed at least 20 individuals spread across 3 hunting parties," Krasat replied, "and their equipment is concerning. Not quite at our level, but close enough to pose a serious challenge." The image zoomed in on one Reparian. Who appeared to be the leader of this particular group. Strapped to its back was a complex apparatus with multiple articulated arms ending in various tools. A mobile extraction and preservation system, Hizit realized. Designed specifically for removing Bronix crystals while maintaining their integrity. "What do you suggest we do, boss?" Lonet asked, turning to face Hizit directly. "Do we have enough of a technological advantage to secure a Bronix against all these competitors?" Hizit considered the question carefully. Their hover discs were superior to anything the other species had demonstrated, and their sensor technology, despite the Reparians' jamming efforts, was still the most sophisticated on the planet. But numbers mattered in a hunt like this, and the combined forces of the Krytar, Iveri, and Reparians significantly outnumbered his small crew. A Bronix, once located, would require careful handling. The crystals were incredibly valuable, but also fragile. Improper extraction could reduce their worth by orders of magnitude. Having the best technology was an advantage, but not a guarantee of success when facing so many determined competitors. He almost laughed when he thought about the humans again. Their presence was so insignificant compared to these other threats that he'd nearly forgotten about them entirely. They would be lucky to survive an encounter with a Bronix, let alone successfully capture one. Hizit was not a soldier or a mercenary. He hadn't risen to his position in Krignian society through force or diplomacy. He was, at his core, a businessman. And business often required compromise and collaboration when direct competition was too costly.
"We need to change our approach," he announced finally. "Captain, can you establish communication with the Krytar and Iveri vessels? And see if you can locate a Reparian communications frequency as well."
Krasat looked surprised. "You want talk to our competition?"
"Sometimes the best way to win is to ensure everyone gets a share," Hizit explained. "Just not equal shares."
It took nearly an hour for Krasat to establish the necessary communication links. The Krytar were the easiest to contact, their communication systems being relatively straightforward. The Iveri required more finesse, as their society placed great importance on proper introductions and formalities. The Reparians, as expected, were the most difficult, initially blocking all communication attempts and only relenting when Hizit authorized Krasat to reveal certain technical specifications of their sensor array as a show of good faith. Finally, the virtual display split into 3 sections, each showing a representative from one of the competing species. War Chief Grault of the Krytar, Elder Screet of the Iveri, and Dominant Thex of the Reparians.
"Greetings, honored hunters,"
Hizit began, employing the formal tones that interspecies negotiations demanded.
"I am Trader Hizit of the Krignian Merchant Guild, and I propose a discussion that may benefit us all."
War Chief Grault growled, his fur bristling.
"What benefit can there be in talking when there are Bronix to hunt? Every moment we waste is an advantage to our competitors." "That is precisely my point,"
Hizit replied smoothly.
"We are all spending resources competing with each other, when cooperation might yield better results for everyone involved."
Elder Screet cocked her head, feathers ruffling slightly. Speak plainly, trader. What form of cooperation do you propose?
An alliance, Hizzit said. Or more accurately, a division of territory and resources. Each of our species has different strengths and weaknesses in this hunt. Together, we could locate and capture more Bronics than any of us could independently.
Dominant Thex's vertical pupils narrowed to thin slits.
And how would the spoils be divided? I doubt you contacted us out of generosity.
Of course not, Hizzit acknowledged. I propose a division based on contribution. My ship's sensors can map Bronic's tunnel networks more extensively than any of your equipment, which gives us a significant advantage in locating them quickly.
Your sensors that we've been destroying?
Thex asked, a hint of amusement in his reptilian voice.
A regrettable waste of resources for both of us, Hizzit replied. Resources that could be better directed toward our common goal.
The negotiations proceeded tensely for several minutes, with each species naturally advocating for a larger share of any Bronics captured. The breakthrough came when War Chief Gralt mentioned the humans.
And what of the soft skins?
He asked.
They too hunt the Bronics, though they crawl like larvae across the ground.
His comment elicited rumbling laughter from his warriors visible in the background of his transmission. Elder Screet's beak clacked in what Hizzit recognized as the Aviri equivalent of laughter.
Humans, with their fragile bodies and blunt claws, what threat could they pose?
Even the usually stoic reptilian, Thex, joined in the mockery.
They brought projectile weapons to hunt Brunics,
he said, his scaled lips pulling back to reveal more of his teeth in what might have been a smile.
As if a bullet could penetrate a Bronic's carapace without shattering the crystals inside.
Hizzit seized on this moment of shared amusement.
Indeed, the humans are no threat to our operations, which is why I suggest we exclude them entirely from our agreement. Let them waste their time. It makes no difference to our success.
This point of agreement shifted the tone of the negotiations. With the humans dismissed as irrelevant, the four species found it easier to focus on dividing the spoils among themselves. Hizzit skillfully leveraged their superior technology to argue for the largest share, while acknowledging the valuable contributions each species could make. The Krytar's tracking abilities would help locate areas where Bronics had recently passed. The Aviri's aerial reconnaissance could cover vast territories quickly. The Reparians' experience with similar prey on their homeworld made them valuable for predicting Bronics' behavior patterns. As they finalized the details of their cooperation, the mockery of the humans continued to serve as a kind of social lubricant, a shared joke that helped bridge the gap between these very different species.
Perhaps we should capture one as a pet,
War Chief Gralt suggested, prompting more laughter.
Teach it to fetch a small game for us.
They might make adequate servants,
Elder Screet mused,
though their lack of wings would limit their usefulness.
Dominant Thex began, but was interrupted by urgent chittering from off-screen. Before the reptilian could speak, Krazat suddenly stepped forward, his wrinkled face contorted with surprise and concern. "Sir," he said urgently to Hizzit, "our sensors have detected a massive Bronics signature. It appears to be engaged in combat with the humans."
What?
Hizzit turned to the shared virtual display, where Krazat quickly brought up a drone feed from the location Lonit had identified earlier. The image was chaotic but clear enough. A full-grown Bronix, at least 18 feet long, had emerged from beneath the crimson vegetation. Its segmented body thrashed violently, hundreds of legs scrambling for purchase as it tried to defend itself or escape. And there, darting around it with surprising coordination, were the three humans they had dismissed so readily.
That's impossible,
Warchief growled through the communication link.
How could they have found the Bronics before any of us?
The drone feed zoomed in closer, showing one of the humans firing not a crude projectile weapon, but some kind of energy device that emitted pulsed bursts of light. Each burst struck the Bronix's carapace and seemed to temporarily immobilize the segment it hit without damaging the crystals embedded there.
What technology is that?
Elder Screet demanded, her feathers fully extended in agitation.
Humans shouldn't have access to targeted neural disruptors.
Dominant Thex hissed, a sound that translated clearly even through the communication system.
This changes our arrangement. If the humans capture that Bronix...
They won't.
Hizzit interrupted, his business instincts giving way to a more primal competitive drive.
That Bronix and its crystals should belong to those with the technology and expertise to properly harvest them. These humans have no right to such a prize.
The representatives of the other species voiced their agreements, their earlier mockery of the humans replaced by urgent concerns and indignation.
I propose we converge on their location immediately.
Hizzit continued, already gesturing to Lonid to prepare their hover discs.
The humans may have found the Bronix through pure luck, but they won't be keeping it. Not if we have anything to say about it.
As the communication links dissolved and the three Krignians rushed to mobilize, none of them noticed the small anomaly in the drone feed. A slight distortion in the air above the battling humans, a ripple in reality that might have been a heat mirage, or something else entirely. Unaware of this, Hizzit and his crew acted before thinking. Within moments of enduring their communication with the other species, they were mounted on their hoverdiscs and dropping through the circular hatch on the underside of their ship. The humid air of Vernally hit them like a wall as they exited the climate-controlled environment of the vessel.
"Maximum speed,"
Hizzit ordered, leaning forward on his disc. The device responded instantly, accelerating to its top velocity with a high-pitched whine. Lonit and Krazat followed close behind, their robes whipping in the wind as they skimmed over the crimson canopy below. The red leaves became a blur beneath them, occasionally parting to reveal glimpses of the dark ground far below. The sun beat down from above, casting its shadows as dark streaks that raced across the undulating surface of the forest. Hizzit's eyes narrowed against the rushing air, fixed firmly on the rocky outcropping that marked their destination.
"Distance?"
he called back to Krazat, who was monitoring their position through his visor. "Very close," the captain replied. "Sensors indicate multiple species converging on the target area." As they approached the rock formation, a jagged spire of weathered stone that rose above the sea of red vegetation like the dorsal fin of some ancient aquatic predator. Hizzit spotted movement in the sky. A group of Aviri circled overhead, their wings reflecting the sunlight as they spiraled down toward the same destination. From the west, the vehicles of the Kritar kicked up clouds of crimson leaves as they barreled across the forest floor, and already waiting at the base of the rock formation were several Reparians, their hover platforms arranged in a defensive semicircle as they monitored the approaching groups with obvious suspicion. Hizzit gestured for his companions to slow their approach.
"Let's not rush in,"
he advised, bringing his hover disc to a halt some distance from the Reparians.
"The humans won't be going anywhere with that Bronix. Not with all of us here."
"You suggest we wait?" Lonit asked, his wrinkled face creased with additional lines of concern.
"Yes,"
Hizzit confirmed.
"Let all parties gather first, then we present a united front."
He adjusted his robes, which had become disheveled during their rapid journey.
"The worst that could happen is the humans lose the battle and die."
They watched as the Aviri landed gracefully on outcroppings of the rock formation. The Kritar vehicles ground to a halt nearby, kicking up a final spray of red vegetation before their six-wheeled chassis settled into silence. Warchief Gralt emerged from the lead vehicle, sniffing the air with obvious agitation. Dominant Thex, the Reparian leader, slithered forward on his hover platform to meet Hizit.
"The humans are on the other side,"
he hissed, his vertical pupils contracting to thin lines in the bright sunlight.
"They appear to have subdued the Bronics."
Impossible!
Elder Screet screeched, descending from her perch to join the gathering.
Their weapons were crude projectile devices. They couldn't have...
"See for yourself,"
Thex interrupted, gesturing toward the rock formation. Hizit exchanged glances with his companions, then addressed the assembled leaders.
"I suggest we approach together. The humans are outnumbered and outmatched. They'll have no choice but to surrender the Bronics to us."
A chorus of agreement met his proposal, with calculated slowness, a show of confidence rather than caution. Hizit lowered his hover disk until it was just a few feet above the ground. The others followed suit, creating an impressive procession of diverse species united by a common purpose. Hizit led them around the base of the rock formation, the hover disk silent. As they rounded the final curve, the clearing came into view, and with it, the scene that had so shocked Dominant Thex. The Bronics lay motionless on the ground, its segmented body stretched out across the clearing like a fallen tree. Its hundreds of legs were still, its armored carapace dull in death. Standing around it were the 3 humans they had dismissed so casually earlier. Each held what Hizit now recognized as advanced sonic weapons, far more sophisticated than the kinetic he had mocked, though the trio still carried them. The humans turned as one at the approach of the alien procession. Without hesitation, they raised their weapons, the devices emitting a low, threatening glow as they powered up. Hizit halted the procession with a raised hand, then glided forward a few meters on his hover disk. He kept his posture tall and imposing, refusing to show the surprise he felt at the humans' apparently advanced weaponry.
"You have killed a Bronix," he stated flatly. "That creature is the rightful property of our consortium."
The tallest human, a male with dark skin and close-cropped hair, stepped forward, his weapon still raised.
"Strange. We didn't see your name on it." "Names are irrelevant,"
Warchief growled, pushing his hover vehicle forward to stand beside Hizit.
"That Bronix belongs to those with the technology and expertise to properly harvest its crystals."
"Which clearly isn't you," another human responded, this one smaller, with pale skin and hair the color of Vernally's red vegetation. "Considering we're the ones who found and subdued it."
You will surrender the creature to us immediately,"
Elder Screet demanded, her wings spreading wide in an instinctive display of dominance. The third human, medium height with features that suggested ancestry from Earth's eastern regions, tilted their head curiously.
"Aren't introductions customary before making demands, or is rudeness standard for all your species?"
Dominant Thex hissed, his scales stiff.
"We have no reason to exchange names with creatures who will soon depart without their prize. We are not here to make friends, humans."
The 3 humans exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Then the dark-skinned one shrugged and lowered his weapon slightly, not enough to suggest surrender, but enough to indicate a willingness to talk. "And what if we don't comply? What if we decide to keep what we worked hard to find?" Hizit gestured expansively at the assembled aliens. At least 30 individuals from 4 different species, all armed, all hostile.
"You are technologically inferior and vastly outnumbered. Your opinions on the matter are irrelevant."
"Besides," Lonit added, unable to resist a final jab, "you don't even possess the technology to extract the crystals without destroying them. What would you do with the Bronix, even if we allowed you to keep it?" The humans exchanged another set of glances, and then, to Hizit's surprise, all 3 simultaneously lowered their weapon. "You're right about one thing," the red-haired human said with a sigh. We don't have the tech to extract the crystals here in the field.
But, the third human continued, we have our own solution to that particular problem.
The dark-skinned human raised a small device to his mouth. Achilles, disengage stealth systems and prepare for cargo retrieval. For a moment, nothing happened. The clearing remained silent except for the low sound of hover discs and platforms. Hizit was about to speak, to mock the humans for their apparent delusion, when a shadow fell across the entire gathering. It began as a darkening of the sunlight, as if clouds had suddenly gathered overhead. But Vernally rarely experienced cloud cover, and the shadow continued to deepen until it seemed like twilight had descended in the middle of the day. As the assembled group looked up. Where empty sky had been moments before, a massive vessel now hung silently overhead. It stretched farther than Hizit could see from his position, its hull a dark, strange material. The sheer size of it was incomprehensible, easily 20 times larger than their own ship, perhaps more. Hizit felt his mouth go dry. His hover disc wobbled beneath him as his concentration faltered.
That's how? Krazat whispered behind him. Our sensors would have detected something that size in orbit.
It wasn't in orbit, the red-haired human explained, seemingly enjoying their shock. It's been right here the whole time. Across the clearing, the group remained frozen in disbelief. War Chief Grout's fur stood on end. His ears flattened against his skull. Elder Screet's wings pulled tight against her body, an instinctive response to feeling vulnerable. Even the usually stoic Reparians showed signs of distress, their scales shifting color slightly as blood drained from the surface vessels beneath.
We'll be taking the entire Bronix back to Earth for proper study and crystal extraction, the third human announced matter-of-factly. Our research teams are quite excited to examine it. You can't,
Hizit began, his business instincts kicking in despite his shock.
Perhaps we can negotiate.
His words died in his throat as sections of the massive ship's hull slid open, revealing what could only be weapons emplacements. Enormous railguns, each barrel larger than their bodies by far, rotated smoothly to point downward at the gathering of different species.
I believe it's too late for negotiations,
the dark-skinned human said, echoing Hizit's earlier dismissal. We're not here to make friends, like one of you said. We're here to take what we found. Hizit's mind raced, desperately searching for a response, a way out, a business strategy that could salvage the situation. But for perhaps the first time in his career, he found himself completely outmaneuvered. I would advise against any sudden movements, the red-haired human added, gesturing toward the massive weapons trained on them from above. Our captain can be a bit, trigger-happy. From the enormous ship, thick cables descended, their ends equipped with harnesses clearly designed to secure and lift the Bronix carcass. With absolute ease, the three humans began attaching these to strategic points along the creature's segmented body. The whole group could only watch in stunned silence, exchanging disbelieving glances, but making no move to interfere. The railguns overhead tracked their every move, reminding them of the new power dynamic that had so suddenly been established. Within minutes, the cables grew taut, and the massive Bronix began to rise from the ground, slowly at first, then with gathering speed as it ascended toward the open bay of the human vessel. The three humans attached themselves to the cables, and they too began to rise alongside their prize. It's been a pleasure doing business with you all, the dark-skinned human called down as he ascended. Though I can't say it's been nice meeting you. They all remained motionless long after the humans and the Bronix had disappeared into the ship's hold. The massive vessel hung above them for several more minutes, its weapons still trained on the gathering below, before it began to move, silently, impossibly, upward into Vernally's atmosphere. No one spoke as the ship grew smaller against the sky. eventually becoming just a dark speck that vanished entirely as its stealth systems re-engaged. Only when it was completely gone did the stunned silence finally break. "Their stealth technology," Krasat murmured, his professional interest momentarily overriding his shock. "To conceal a vessel of that size." His it said nothing, still processing the implications. If humans possessed technology advanced enough to hide a capital ship from all known detection methods, what other capabilities might they have that the galactic community had overlooked? The group lingered in stunned silence, the sky above them empty once more, his its claws flexed absently against the soil, his mind churning. If the humans could cloak a ship of that magnitude, what else had they concealed? What other weapons, alliances, or ambitions had gone unnoticed? One thing was now painfully clear. The galaxy had gravely miscalculated the humans' place among the stars.